Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and you guys know what time it is. Time to talk about current events in the online fitness community. And the single most requested video this week for people asking me to cover was by a guy called Greg Doucette. I believe that's the name, Greg Doucette. Greg Doucette, I might get it wrong in my pronunciation. But he's a Canadian bodybuilder. And guys, I don't know these different bodybuilding classes. I think he competes in something called classic bodybuilding, which they want you to look more like older school bodybuilders, but they don't look anything like older school bodybuilders. I don't really get that, but fair enough. That's what they choose to call it, and I think that's what he competes in. And he did a full breakdown of his cycle. So let me go ahead and put on my +5 hat of speechcraft, lovingly called my +5 hat of autism by many of you, and let's talk about this. And what people do need to understand, what I'm going to break down a little bit in here so that you guys kind of know what's happening. People always say things like, well, how come this person used stuff, or I know this person used stuff, and they don't look like that? Because they didn't use the same stuff. I mean, it shouldn't be that hard to figure out. I mean, people need to understand, people who are chasing, whether it's physique goals or they're chasing performance goals or anything else, don't put random stuff into their body, right? Different substances have different effects in the body. And for people who don't grasp that, people who don't hang around that world, they're not familiar with that, you guys probably know that marijuana, alcohol, and cocaine have all totally different effects in the body, right? Most of you are aware of this, right? If you did any of those three substances, whether legal or not, they would have a different effect on you. They don't all do the exact same thing. There's a difference in them. You don't feel exactly the same. They don't hit the systems of the body quite the same. They don't have the same effects. You don't get the exact same buzz off of all three of those. They're all completely different. That's something people can understand, right? Well, different anabolics have enormously different effects on your body. Okay? And they have to do with different things that they do as far as change ratios and other hormones and things that they convert to. There's an enormous difference. And by that same token, you'll look at these guys even today who are in this whatever classic thing, and you'll be like, well, how come the bodybuilders back in the 60s or the 70s didn't have that look? Well, for the same reason that the guy at your gym who uses some stuff doesn't have that look, or that powerlifter you see doesn't have that look. And like that bodybuilder doesn't have that look 3 months later. Okay? Because that's caused by specific substances. It's not caused by them dieting and being lean. All right? Just because you're 6% body fat doesn't mean you're going to have that look. So when someone has that grainy look that he's talking about, that shrink-wrapped, ripped look that they get, that is caused by specific substances in the body. That's not because they dieted, right? Or it's not because of the fact that they used stuff. So again, that's something people need to understand. And yes, that is a dead giveaway that people use not just stuff, but specific stuffs. In other words, have a real good idea of what categories of things they used if they have that look. Not if they're natural or not. You don't even need to worry about that at that point. But kind of an idea of what they took. And it's exactly what he did. Now, he went into some of the details and he explained that he started off on like a 400 testosterone, which is its own category. And then he cut it out so that he would get the look. It's too much testosterone and you won't have that look anymore. Why? Because it makes you retain a little water, causes some bloating. And it's not necessarily fat bloating, but you're not going to be able to get dry. It's not that you're necessarily going to bloat and gain a bunch of water. It's that you won't have that shrink-wrapped, grainy look, that three-dimensional look, right? You're not going to have it because it's going to hold intramuscular water. It's going to hold a little subcutaneous water. It'll keep you at a healthy amount, minimum, if it doesn't cause any bloating. And you can't have a healthy amount of that and have that look. You have to have an unhealthy amount of water distribution and stuff in your body. So what he went into is everything else he uses in the same category, right? Because that's its own category. He was on 300 milligrams of primobolan, 300 milligrams of drostalenone propionate, and 300 milligrams of anavar, which is oxandrolone. That's what he was on, which, by the way, oxandrolone is actually a lot of powerlifters like that too, in my sport. For obvious reasons, particularly people trying to make a weight class. It's actually more popular than you would think. But the point is with those are all DHT based dry substances. What I mean DHT, they're based on the DHT molecule, not the testosterone molecule. None of them convert into estrogen. They're all dry. They're all dry substances. Right? That's what they all have in common. Zero water retention, and in fact, if you took just those on its own at a normal level and you weren't putting any testosterone into your body, you would probably lose water and look drier. Now, there's going to be health effects to that. Right? It's going to mess up your cholesterol immediately. You're going to notice your HDL crash. You're going to be at risk of connective tissue injuries and things like that if that's all you did, because again, your estrogen and everything is going to drop because that's what happens. And that's what he started at, and then later he said he upped the dose on some of those and he cut his testosterone out and added different things in like letrozole, which he called it Femara. I guess that's the original clinical term. Letrozole is a street name, and that would be the a specific brand name of it, I believe. But yeah, I do believe Femara is the generic name for it, or it could be wrong. It could be switched. I think Femara is actually the other. But he made an interesting point there that a lot of guys, you're thinking that a lot of these bodybuilders have a really high sex drive. It's like, no, you're on a moderate amount of test or low test and you take letrozole. He's right. Your PP is not going to work. And it's because it has such an enormous suppressive effect on estrogen levels that it messes with your sex drive, can cause depression, everything else, and higher chances of connective tissue damage. So again, you guys wonder why a lot of these bodybuilders are always getting hurt, why they can't lift heavy, stuff like that. Low estrogen. And a lot of guys forget that. They think in terms of these different hormones in the body. They're like, oh yeah, estrogen bad because it makes you bloat. Well, no. Estrogen makes you hold a normal amount of water, a healthy amount. It's also necessary for maximum anabolic function in your muscle tissue. Like if estrogen goes too low, you gain less muscle. Even if you're putting stuff in your body, you gain less muscle. Estrogen also has a protective effect on connective tissue because it can help with collagen synthesis. And if it goes too low, collagen synthesis goes down, connective tissue becomes more brittle, recovers slower, and you can get more rips and tears. You get hurt easier. But the other big one that guys got to remember, they say silly stuff like, I want to bring my estrogen down. Well, the PP-is not going to work, guys. You're going to have erectile dysfunction. And some guys go, well, couldn't you take Viagra for that? Well, yeah, but you won't need it because you're not going to be interested, right? It's not just that it's not going to work. You're not going to care anyways at that point, right? You could just look at yourself in the mirror and that'll be the most excitement you get. You're not going to care about women or any of that anymore. It's not going to be the last thing on your mind. You're not even going to care. Like you could have the woman that was your fantasy girl, your lifelong fantasy, right? Your favorite actress of some type. Could be butt naked in front of you, and you take a bunch of letrozole and you crash your estrogen levels. She won't even look. She won't even be hot. You won't care. You won't even be interested. You won't be interested at all. Don't worry about it. And it's not like you'd be able to do anything if you were. So that's kind of the point. Your sex drive goes away. Sex drive goes away if you use too much of all that stuff because estrogen is actually required in a healthy range, right? A healthy range of it is required for sex drive. It's required for health as far as lipid profiles. It's required for connective tissue health, all this stuff. So actually the wetter substances are usually better for people who want strong tendons and not get hurt. So that's one of the big problems why a lot of these bodybuilders do get hurt either. It's not just this idea that all these hormones make your muscles stronger than your connective tissue can keep up. Well, in some cases they can, but also because some of these substances weaken connective tissue because estrogen and things go too low. But that was an interesting caveat that he threw in there with that. And then he talked about the other fat burners and stuff. So you guys kind of get an idea. That's basically what he did. It's, again, a very, very dry stack. Give him that shrink wrap look. Now, was it a lot? He kind of tried to defend it and say, well, it's not really a lot. I'm like, to me, that sounds like a lot. All right, I'm from strength sports. I'm a former gear user when I was younger and everything. And people go, why didn't you look like that? Because I didn't use that. Well, that's a big part of it. I don't have the genetics for that endeavor, for one. Number two, I didn't use that. Number three, the quantities that he even used, were never necessary for me to have a 600-pound squat. It's not necessary to be using 1.3 grams and stuff like that. Like, when you using over a gram, guys, that is, to me, that is a lot, right? When you start hitting a gram or more of stuff a week, to me, based upon my life experiences and the circles I've been in, that is a lot. That's a lot. That's not an intermediate amount, like he said. That's a very advanced amount. Like, for me, if you were to ask me at what point would a person consider that much, when you get to worlds and non-drug tested powerlifting, like at world championship, right? That might be when, particularly if it's in a country where it's all legal. Hey, great. So to me, that's excessive, and says me. It's my opinion. I think that's excessive. I think that's an insane amount. I would never recommend any person who chose to use stuff at any recreational or amateur level in anything consider something like a gram or more. I just wouldn't. I think it's ridiculous. And that's my opinion on it. And he can disagree. All of you could be free to disagree. And I would say for most of you, you should stay natural. You shouldn't use anything ever. Another little side note I caught in there, and this kind of comes back to my own confusion, because I want to address this whole confusion with the classic physique thing, because I don't always understand it. Like this whole bodybuilding thing and their thing with what they believe is aesthetics. And that's one reason I make fun of the aesthetics world. The stuff that they call aesthetic is actually hideous. Like, you guys say, well, you're a powerlifter, you're hideous. I don't think I'm any more hideous than what these guys look like. I'm really not. And it's not classic physique at all. And I'll jump into that in a minute. But the first thing he said, well, this guy, Chris Bumstead, he looks so good. So I went to look who the guy was up, and I almost vomited in my mouth when I saw the amount of synthol in the guy's delts. Like, I have never seen a guy at that size in my life who has that much oil in his deltoids. And for me, because I know what injections feel like, and I know what accompanies it, for me to see someone who has injected that much oil into a muscle like that, and for me, for someone who has to train, I train heavy. For me, the idea of trying to lift, and the feeling you would get just putting that into your shoulders made me sick to my stomach. Like, it's repugnant, it's revolting. Like, that is hideous. That's hideous. Like, I'm shocked that a guy at that size is just swelling that many inches of garbage into his shoulders. So when he said the guy looked good, it's like the guy is revolting. Like, that is repugnant. Like, people think that big, massive synthol delts is supposed to look good. He's got enormous big lumps of oil. That's not muscle, guys. That's oil. And then you come over to the point of these guys with this classic thing of why are they trying to chase this look? We come back to that point, the exact point I made. They're talking about being grainy or whatever. They want to call it classic bodybuilding. Well, what the hell looks classic about being gross and veiny looking and like grainy and dry like that? That's not what a classic physique looks like. No one thinks that looks good. Literally nobody. Classic physiques were based upon like golden Greek era aesthetics. You think of like Reg Park or Steve Reeves. That's a classic bodybuilder. These guys get down to so revoltingly low body fat with that weird grainy dehydrated look that it looks nothing like that. So I don't know why in the hell they call it that. Why don't they just call it bodybuilding smaller? Bodybuilding without insulin. Why don't they call it that? Just call it insulin-free bodybuilding, because that's basically what it is, right? I don't know. I don't get it. I don't get it personally. They still don't look anything like classic bodybuilders, and it's because the judges call it that, but they don't actually require them to look like that when they're scoring them and giving them wins. I don't know. I just don't understand the bodybuilding world personally. But hopefully that answered some of the questions. People wanted me to review what he was taking and what I thought about it, so there you have it. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.